The question is that the motion be agreed to.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker, and I thank the member forward for his bipartisan gesture. Deputy Speaker, economic reform in Australia has never been easy. In the post-war decades, the Conservatives built up a tariff wall that helped make Australian industry uncompetitive and kept consumer prices high. In 1973, Gough Whitlam began the long process of breaking down Australia's tariff walls, the 25% across-the-board tariff cuts. What did those opposite do? Well, they came into this place and attacked him for it. Ralph Hunt, Michael McKellar, Ian Sinclair and others criticised it. Victorian Chamber of Manufacturers condemned it. Yet nearly 40 years on, no one is arguing for the tariff wall to be rebuilt. This, in a nutshell, is the story of economic reform in Australia, argued by Labor, often opposed by the Conservatives, and in the end becoming a part of the Australian social fabric. And the result of reform is the prosperity that Australians now enjoy. 4% growth rates, 5% unemployment, 2% inflation, an RBA cash rate of 3.5%. Economic circumstances the rest of the world would give their eye teeth for. But, Deputy Speaker, when those opposite speak about the economy, there is only one place in which they seem to be willing to tell the truth, and that's when they go to London. When the opposition leader was in London recently, he said, quote, "Australia has serious bragging rights. Compared to most developed countries, our economic circumstances are enviable." When the member for North Sydney went to London, he referred to the fact that Hong Kong, whose debt levels are twice Australia's, had moderate government debt. He's certainly telling the truth and clearly indicates his belief that Australia has low government debt. It is passing strange, Deputy Speaker, that it is only when they go to London, only when they're in the mother country, that those opposite can tell the truth about the Australian economy. Makes you wonder perhaps whether what's going through their heads. I think it could be something like, "I did but see her passing by, I cannot tell an economic lie." And, Deputy Speaker, it would be easy to spend 10 minutes talking about the protectionism of Barnaby Joyce, the DLP-style intervention of Tony Abbott, the backflips of Joe Hockey on the Parliamentary Budget Office and the opportunism over the debt ceiling. Deputy Speaker, those opposite wouldn't know a Pigouvian tax if they tripped over one, and they're the only ones in Australia who seem to think that royalties are better than a profits-based tax for taxation of mining. Back when they were introducing the GST, the Coalition liked to point out that almost every OECD country had a GST. By 2015, there will be national or sub-national emission trading schemes in every OECD country but one. But now Coalition MPs have changed their arguments. They say we should be lone wolves rather than running with the pack. And yet, as George Megalogenis reminds us in his most recent book, here's John Howard on the 3rd of June 2007 promising, quote, "This will be a world-class emissions trading system, more comprehensive, more rigorously grounded in economics and with better governance than anything in Europe. Implementing an emissions trading scheme and setting a long-term goal for reducing emissions will be the most momentous economic decisions Australia will take in the next decade." That is John Howard. Similarly, Deputy Speaker, a profits-based mining tax is no more a left-wing idea than a good one. Yes, it was the Hawke government who introduced the petroleum resource rent tax and a profits-based tax on uranium, but it was Sarah Palin, the Conservative Alaska governor, who put a profits-based tax on petroleum when she was Governor of Alaska. It was the Northern Territory Conservatives who were responsible for the profits-based mining taxes that have worked so well in the NT. Profits-based taxes are just a smarter way of taxing mining. They make sure that when world prices rise, taxpayers share in the windfall. Deputy Speaker, the current Liberal Party leadership has more in common with the DLP than the market-oriented party of John Howard, Brendan Nelson and the member for Wentworth. And the current National Party leadership has more in common with the protectionism all-round of Blackjack McEwen than the reforming party of Tim Fischer and Mark Vaile. But rather than dwell on the Coalition's economic illiteracy, I want to talk about the challenges and opportunities for Australia. With the rise of China, Australia sees great opportunities for our exports, not only in goods but also in services. Australian finance and architecture firms are engaged with the Chinese boom. But as we move to a more open economy, we need to make sure that we keep on investing in infrastructure and in education. We know that boosting the quality and quantity of Australian education is absolutely essential as we move to a more open and technologically savvy world. We need to boost productivity, and there was some reference last week to the Productivity Commission list of things to do. Lost in that debate, I think, was the fact that among those lists are things such as efficient water pricing, harmonised building codes and quicker processing of applications for major resource projects, all things the government is pursuing. We also need to make sure that we help build an entrepreneurial culture. I pay tribute to Australia's latest Nobel laureate, Brian Schmidt, for his enthusiasm in making sure that we get more scientists and researchers. Deputy Speaker, when the Leader of the Opposition was asked why he couldn't find a single academic economist to back his command and control climate policy over Labor's market alternative, he responded by saying that this said something about the quality of Australian economists. Nothing could be further from the truth. Australian academic economics is perhaps as strong as it's ever been. Let me take a moment to note for the House some of the important research taking place. At ANU, the Karma Centre's established a Shadow Reserve Bank board to look at some of the uncertainty around monetary policy. The Shadow Board comprises Paul Bloxham, Mark Crosby, Marty Dungy, Saul Estlake, Bob Gregory, James Morley, Geoffrey Sheen, Mark Thirlwell and Sean Vahey. And I acknowledge the work that Warwick McKibben has done at the Australian National University to build up Karma into such a powerhouse. At Deakin University, the Deakin University Policy Forum is aimed at stimulating high-quality discussion of economic policy. At Griffith, the Economic Policy Analysis Program aims to foster economic research, particularly in the area of macroeconomics. Simon Vill and Glenn Withers are currently editing the Cambridge Economic History of Australia, because it's only by understanding your economic past that you can build great policies for the future. And the Melbourne Institute, the Hilda surveys facilitated hundreds of academic studies, including work on employment, health, inequality, mobility, crime and happiness. Victoria University of Technology is hosting the Australian Conference of Economists on the 9th to 12th of July, and I'm looking forward to speaking and listening to some of the quality presentations at that conference. The ANU Crawford School's Economics and Environment Network was an important contributor to the development of an emissions trading scheme through its support for Professor Ross Garnaut. The Crawford School are also hosting a Public Policy Week from the 16th to the 20th of July, which will include a roundtable on the Henry Tax Review with James Merles. University of New South Wales has set up a Centre for Excellence for Population Ageing Research involving economists and demographers. Monash University recently hosted a major development economics workshop supported by AusAid and involving Abhijit Banerjee from MIT. Next month, Monash are hosting a joint conference with Warwick University on superannuation, and the University of Queensland are running the 2012 Society for the Advancement of Economic Theory conference. Deputy Speaker, when Labor put an assets test on the pension in the early 1980s, opposition leader Andrew Peacock called it an assault on the elderly and promised to repeal it when the coalition won office. A decade after floating the dollar, the leader of the opposition still thought it was a bad idea. For every reform, you'll always find someone standing against it. But the thing is, Deputy Speaker, history will forget the naysayers. History remembers the doers. And eventually, history forgets the doers. It forgets the parliamentarians who even spoke for a reform. It only remembers the things they did. And the things we do in this place will outlast us. Reforms like an emissions trading scheme, a profits-based mining tax, a national disability insurance scheme, school infrastructure that'll stand the test of generations, and the national broadband network will be here long after those of us in this place have moved on. I thank the House. It's designed to penalise business, to regulate it out of existence. And of course, if you carry on with that logic, then the member for McKellar should today be saying to this chamber that superannuation is penalising business and ought to be scrapped. But the fact is, Deputy Speaker, that no one's making those arguments, and I quote back to some of these statements made in the early 1990s because it illustrates an important point, not just about superannuation, but also about economic reform in Australia more generally. The economic reforms that have made Australia great, like universal superannuation, are hard fought at the time. Many of them are opposed by those opposite, and many of those opposite at the time said that they would scrap them if they were to take the Treasury benches. But when they did, in fact, take the Treasury benches, they did nothing of the kind. Universal superannuation is now a part of the Australian social fabric. Attacked at the time, demonised as being a big new tax, now recognised as being an important pillar of a dignified retirement in Australia. 8.4 million Australian workers will benefit from increasing the superannuation guarantee rate from 9 to 12%. This government is also abolishing the age limit for the superannuation guarantee. So no matter what your age, if you're working, you'll get super. We're providing an extra superannuation contribution for 3.6 million Australians who are earning up to $37,000. So that includes plenty of part-time workers as well as low-income earners. It's a recognition of the point made in the Henry Tax Review that the superannuation concessions were, under the Howard government, significantly more generous for high-income earners than for low-income earners. And we're putting in place simplification reforms, allowing people to see all their superannuation account, giving employees certainty by requiring the superannuation information to be on every payslip, so workers can check to make sure that they've got what they're entitled to, and introducing a MySuper product, recognising that for most employees they will take the default fund, and within that fund they'll take the default investment plan. So it's important that defaults are good and that defaults make sure that people get good market returns. We're also putting in place more efficiencies to ensure lower fees for fund members. All of these reforms are ensuring that Australians get the superannuation they're entitled to and ensure that the system is as simple, efficient and equitable as it needs to be. I commend the legislation to the House.